Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming. I'm Kathy Zakowski. I'm an occupational therapist and a neuroscientist. I think they don't have volume for the see if you.
Hi, and I'm Jen Keller.
So they told us it's just for the people that are Zooming, and so we'll just talk louder. Is that what you need? Yeah, and the band. Okay, this way. Yeah. Okay.
Hey,
so,
Oprah.
but why don't you introduce yourself too?
Sorry. I'm Jennifer Keller. I'm a physical therapist, and I work have a movement lab where we study how people move. And because of Kathy, I have about 20 years been studying and working with people with leukodystrophy. So we appreciate you having us today.
So the goal today is really to share a little information about balance, and I'll start out talking to you, and we'll kind of go back and forth. But if you have questions in between, feel free to raise your hand or put it in the chat. And then at the end, if we have time, we'll do a little bit of a demo so you can sort of see how to do some of these things. So the goal is not to put you to sleep, but really to keep you moving. So we thought the music might actually help. Okay, so maybe can you go forward one?
No.
You have to use these.
Uh-huh.
Oh, it's not doing it.
What about this thing?
He said the clicker doesn't work,
Oh,
so
okay.
let's see. Maybe I have to do that and now it'll work?
Oh, no, that's the Zoom.
I don't know.
Here, I think you have to go, maybe you have to be, is the mouse on that thing now? No.
They were hand clicking it before. I don't know if that.
That's what we were trying to. We'll try to. Yeah, it was working. When he was here, the arrows worked.
Do I need to click on the?
That's what I was thinking. Yeah, on the slides.
I can't find the slide.
If you go up, I think they pop up, or maybe it's down there. Sorry, this is not what we're good at. Is this part right here?
There we go. All right.
Okay.
Yay.
Okay, so this is our overview. So we're going to define what we mean by postural control. We're going to talk about what we've learned about what impairments in leukodystrophies affect postural control and the consequences of that, and explain to you why this would be important for you all to know about too. And then we're going to talk a little bit about rehabilitation for imbalance and give you some ideas of things you can do right now to address this. Okay, you can go to the next. All right, so what is postural control? So there are a lot of definitions if you put this into Google. We wanted to define it here as the act of maintaining or achieving or restoring a state of balance during any posture or activity. For today's talk, we're going to use postural control and balance interchangeably, but there are reasons why you might want to separate that out for some research that we do. But for today's purposes, we're just going to say they're the same thing. Go ahead to the next slide. So the way we stay upright, whether we're sitting or standing, is that we have three main systems that feed into the brain. And it's as important because if even one of these systems is not working right, then you have imbalance. So using your vision, and you know what this is like because even when you go into a dark room, you feel like you might want to use your hands or your feet a little more to feel where you are because you can't see, right? Auditory, we get a lot of information about sounds and distance of sounds, and that gives us information. And then somatosensory, which is really just, we have special sensors in our ankles, for example, that tell us where we are, whether we're looking or not. So without vision, I know where my arms are and where my legs are. And that type of sensation is really critical to us staying upright and whether we're sitting or standing. Okay, we'll go to the next slide. There are lots of systems that play into this. So I explained the three main ones, right? But there are a lot of other ways to describe this. So the musculoskeletal system, which is our bones and our muscles. So the strength in your muscles and the alignment of your bones. So literally aligning my trunk upright versus out like this or like this makes a difference. Neuromuscular, so the fact that our brain talks to our muscles and we have to turn the right muscle on at the right time and in the right order. That's sort of neuromuscular control, and that helps us with our posture. Sensory and perceptual information. So as I was explaining, this ability to know where your body parts are in space without looking at them is critical to our posture. There are also sensory strategies, so organization of all this input. So my ability to not listen to the music out there, but focus on what we're doing here, that's part of what our brain does kind of automatically. And if that's missing, that will affect our posture. There's also evidence of kind of an internal mapping. So we link all of this sensory information. I'm getting information from the floor right now, and that's telling me that the floor is this direction and not slanted like this or like this. And so then I know how to orient my body. So all of that, I have to know how big my body is and how long my legs are and how much I weigh. And all of that is sort of stored in the brain and in a way that is very useful for posture. And there are also higher level controls, so even cognitive information that we use. So the fact that I anticipate that when I'm raising my hand to turn the light on, that now my body weight is changing and my mapping is changing because now I have this extension of my arm. And so all of that happens very naturally. But you will notice right away when one system goes, so you don't feel sensation as well, you have trouble with vision, you're weak, then everything starts to fall apart, and these automatic features become really obvious that they're not working. Okay, we can go to the next slide. This is you, right?
So
I want to use this one.
Really good. Sorry. So just as Kathy was talking about, there's a number of things that, impact how good our postural control is or what things might make it harder. So as Kathy was saying, if the area is lit up nicely or if it's in the dark at night, you might have more trouble. If there's an object in your way that you might trip over or you have to walk around. If the surface is uneven, like walking out over the grass. But then also our age impacts our postural control. So you can think about a toddler learning to walk and they don't know how to do it. They can't integrate all these systems yet. So their postural control is not, perfected. We know that you don't even get all of your sensory adaptation for how you adjust for these different environments until you're actually 12. So that's one thing that impacts how good our balance is. And then health conditions and medication. And then I guess if I go back to age, thinking about as we get older, we also sort of have a harder time incorporating all these different things. Maybe we have some sensory loss. And so we know that postural control changes as we age as well. And then, so any sort of symptoms of a health condition can impact our postural control as well. And so, particularly in leukodystrophy, so the severity of the symptoms can matter. So if it's just a mild sensory loss, so you can still feel something, it might be slower to respond. But if you lose your ability to know if you've shifted your weight forward or back, at your ankles, then you're going to need to rely on what happens at your hips, and then you're going to have to shift your weight even further to recover your loss of balance. Weakness, so we don't really think about strength as maintaining our balance, but there's probably a threshold of how much strength you have to have in order to get a good reaction from your muscles to react to a loss of balance. How long this has been a problem, both like if you have a new onset of symptoms, your brain hasn't learned to adjust to those changes yet, but maybe you've had some symptoms for a longer period of time and other parts of our brains have adapted to that and made it a compensation. And then just having worse balance, worse gait, these things can come from the symptoms directly and also just from deconditioning. Like if you don't use it, you kind of lose it over time. And that's where we often target, initially making sure that people are as strong as they can be, because that can also benefit you. And then, as I said, with age, there might be different stages during life when your posture is affected for different reasons. Okay. And then there's consequences to poor postural control, right? I think we all think about falls, but initially it might just affect, how your stepping is, whether or not you take steps and put your foot where you want it to go. Maybe you walk slower. It's trouble with these different environments, maybe turning your head. It can be really tiring, right? If your balance is off, it's just more effort to take every step, and so that can be fatiguing. So falls are a problem, but also just being afraid of falling changes how you move and how you do your things in life. And so that is another big impact of being unbalanced. It may mean that you need to use a walk aid. It may mean that you have a hard time standing upright. You can then have trouble with showering and everyday activities, washing the dishes, and then even just getting out of bed to a chair, getting out of a chair, getting in and out of the car. Those are like other places that your postural control is important. And then sitting upright without back support also contributes, is when you need to have good postural control. And these can be affected by having poor postural control. So, thanks. And in the clinic, so with your physician or with me as a PT, we tend to measure these things like by, how fast can you walk, timing, how quick you get up from a chair and walk, turn around, come back and sit down. Maybe we actually have you walk on a path and have you walk around cones or step over a shoebox or something like that, and we rate it. And then we also look at can you stand still, and how much do you sway when you stand still? Can you put your feet together and stay upright for how long? And how much sway do you have like that? Can you do that if you close your eyes as well? And perturbations, maybe we, push you in different directions to see if you can recover from those things. And those all give us sort of a clinical picture of where you are with targets of things to address in particular. And then Kathy's going to tell us about the lab.
Okay, so I want to touch on how we use these specialized tools in a laboratory to quantify balance. And this is really important because if we're going to have better interventions, we have to be able to quantify change quickly. You don't want to wait 3 years, right, to determine if an intervention works. So the better we can use some of these quantitative tools, the faster we can test different interventions. So that's a major goal with this. So one thing we've been doing for the last 15, 20 years actually, is trying to understand how much we move when we stand still. And it turns out in adrenoleukodystrophies, because there's some change in sensation and strength, that people move more than individuals who don't have leukodystrophy, right? So we can measure that. So we have people stand on what's called a force plate. It's just it's sort of situated in the floor, it doesn't move, and that goal is to measure if you had a pen that I put right between my feet and I just stood still, we all move a little bit, and our nervous system is constantly saying, nope, that's too far, go this way, come back, so that I can stand quietly. And when you lose sensation or strength, you move more. And that's what's demonstrated here. This is the amount of movement in a 60-second trial of just asking the person to stand still. This is how much someone moves when they don't have a leukodystrophy and they don't have loss of sensation or strength. You can go to the next. So I wanted to share a couple, there's a lot of studies about this. Some of them are specific to leukodystrophies and some are not, but it might be useful to understand some of this. So one study looked at just even the lightest amount of touch, like not even a pound of touch. If I just stand with my finger on the table, I get a lot of information. It makes me far, far more stable than it would if you didn't do that. So use that. So when you're going up and down stairs, it might be good to just have your hand lightly on the wall or on the handrail. You don't have to lean on it all the way. You might just get enough information with light touch. Another study looked at people that use the right walking device and are trained in how to use it the right way have much better balance. It sounds so obvious, right? But people buy things on Amazon and you kind of guess at what height you need something and then you use it the best you can. But it turns out there are sort of guidelines that a physical therapist can really help you know how to use which device might be best for you and what are the pros and cons in some of them. And using the right device will help your balance. There's also we've done a lot of studies in our laboratory looking at what part of standing and walking really is the most critical piece that we would have to address. So when you take a step, I take a step with one leg, and during that time I have to balance my weight on this leg, right? And so I have to not only balance it, but I have to shift my weight over, put my weight here, and then take a step. So we kind of broke that apart and we said, is it the shifting of the weight over that's important, or is it me actually having to be able to control my leg and push it out here? And what we found is it's the shifting of weight that's the more critical piece. So knowing that from the research, now you can, as you're taking steps, you might be more conscious. Okay, I want to be clear that I'm shifting weight and then I take the step. So it might help you in terms of balance. And these are things we can target in therapy. We also know that sway or balance can be affected by medications and the dose of medications. So don't forget that, because it's really hard when you start taking lots of different medicines. You might think, oh, this is just my condition changing, when it might be the impact of the medication. And so talking to your physician about this and being aware of this might be helpful to you. Okay, you can go to the next slide. So I wanted to show some data, just because this is sort of what Jen and I really like doing, is working in a laboratory and collecting data and being very, very specific about what we're looking at. So we did one study where we found that we measured all these things. So we measured hip flexion strength, and this is hip flexion, right, and being able to lift your knee up. Vibration, so the sensation that you feel in your feet. We also measured the range of motion in your ankle, because again, you can imagine if you don't have normal range of motion, that could affect your balance. Spasticity, that's the tightness in your muscles. We can measure that. We measured age and what sex they were. And we found that the two features that made the most difference to just standing still was hip flexion strength and vibration sensation. So two things that we could intervene with in therapy. We could try to change your strength at least, right? And this over here, we followed people for several years, and we followed how their standing balance changed every time we tested them, right? Once a year for several years. And what you're seeing here, the blue line is the men and the red line is the women. Or is it vice versa? Is that right? I always get that wrong. And these dotted lines are individual people. So if you just pay attention to the solid line, you can see that over time, we can detect that postural sway changes. So this is, again, important, because if we want to test new medications or new interventions, we want to be able to detect a change fast. And the best we've been able to do so far is 2 years. So it's better than it's been. It's been more like 5 years up to now, but it's still not perfect, right? We want to be able to do this in months if we could. But these kinds of tools, we think, have the potential to lead to that. Okay. This is you, I think, right?
So just as Kathy was saying that it takes 2 years to measure that change in sway, we only know it takes 2 years because we've only measured everybody every year. And a lot of that's because you have to travel a long way to come to our lab in order to be able to get those measurements. And so that can complicate the problem, and it takes a lot of technology. So you may have heard about wearable technology, like the thing I have on my wrist, and that measures all of your steps. But there are ones that are research grade. We use something through APDM right now that we collect, we send to people's homes, and we collect their sway information. How well can they do in each of these positions? And we have the ability, even though it's still expensive, to send it out every 6 months. So maybe we'll be able to pick up this change that we see in 18 months, which would really be a big difference. In addition to that, we're finding some interesting things that we hadn't looked at before. So we looked at how much people sway with their feet together, that's the FA, and their eyes closed. And we looked at the people who use a walking device to walk with and the people who don't. And you can see how much less people sway when they are not needing a device, and how much more people were swaying if they used a device. And we think this could be really interesting and really helpful as a marker for, like, if your sway starts to get worse, this might be an indication that it's time to use an assistive device as one marker. It could also be a good target. Like, if we can get your sway to get down a little bit lower, we know that, we have a potential to mean that you don't need to use the device as much. So that would be another thing. And then we're also really interested in how we improve sway. And we've done some studies, and we're doing some studies on training, strength training, balance training, and using Tai Chi. So, good, yeah. So Kathy and I did a study where we had women with AMN and age-matched controls go to Curves gyms for 12 weeks and exercise 3 times a week. And what we found was that they were able to, I'm sorry, for some reason the scale's a little off, but here's hip strength for the women with AMN, increase their hip strength as much as the controls in this amount of time, which was really exciting. And we also found that increased their walking speed as much as the controls in this exercise. But what we didn't measure was their balance. So it would be really interesting to know if exercise can also improve balance as well as their strength and walking ability. And so we are just starting a pilot study with number of different leukodystrophies, but we just started with children with LBSL doing a home balance exercise program, so you wouldn't have to go to a gym, first of all, with direct supervision. So like once a week, we watch how you're doing your exercises and progress them. And then also using a strength training study that Kathy and I did with people with MS using resistance bands. And then lastly, a group exercise of Tai Chi right now with adults with ataxia. But we hope to, keep going with that in order to see what the effect can have.
Okay, I'm going to talk to you about some things that we think things you could do now. Like, so what are some ways that you can? So why don't you click so that I can see all of the slide? Yeah. There we go. So one thing, and this is obvious, right? These bands, these accelerometers are so available. I just wanted to kind of highlight that one thing that it might allow us to do is you could determine how active you are from day to day. You can target whether you reach certain number of steps per day. And this gets at physical activity, but also as you're moving, you're having to test your own balance too. You can go to the next. Before I go on, and one other thing that I didn't mention, that last bullet, and you might also notice a difference. You could even test it yourself, do a little experiment. Maybe I'm more active when I use different devices, and so that could give you some information. So maybe for exercise, you use a different device so that you can do more safely, and then you don't use that device maybe for regular times during the day. Okay, so now go ahead. So the other thing I wanted to emphasize was it's really important to recognize that just everyday physical activity is really important and will help you with your balance. So one thing that is really important is just every day, if you can safely get yourself to the floor and safely get yourself up, that is a really hard task. You have to bring your body weight up against gravity. And the importance of that kind of exercise is that if you did happen to fall, now you've practiced how you would get up. And maybe you've practiced with your caregiver too, right? So this way everyone knows how this works. And if you fall, it's not usually you're not very calm. So this way you've practiced a little bit. But I would recommend this idea of just even getting up from the floor every day, practicing this as one way to test your balance and keep you strong. Another idea might be just even transferring from one surface to another. Going from a high surface to a low surface is really hard, so that might be a step in the right direction. If you can't quite get to the floor and up yet, you could just go from a high chair to a lower chair as a way of adapting that process. But really, any of the functional activities that you do in your day, think about how this is testing your balance as you're doing it. And so that's very important for all of us to be doing every day. Go ahead and go to the next. So we did a strength training study, and we wanted to share a little bit about how we did it, because this is something you could do at home. So what we did is we developed a kind of a sheet that we could track people. So we put down kind of the number of repetitions we asked them to do, how much effort they were putting out, because it turns out scientifically this effort piece is really important. If you do always low effort activities and you never are really perturbing your system very well, you're not going to make as many gains. So it's important to have some increased effort as you exercise. We use resistance bands, and the color gives you information about how much resistance there is, and you can see over here. So we had set it up so there's low resistance, moderate, and more resistance. And you can, when you purchase this online, they will give you that information about which color is which resistance. In addition to color, it's the length of the band. So if you put this stationary on, say, the leg of your couch, and you pull up against it, how far away you are and how long that band is important for the amount of resistance you're going to have. And then it's important, we know that in order to make progress with many exercise programs, you have to have a goal. So what is your goal? Could it be number of repetitions? Could be the color of the band? It could be the band length. Any of those things, even one of those things would make a difference. And so you can set something like this up very easily at your home. And if you have questions about that, please come to us and we'd be happy to give you some information. You can go to the next. And we also, we envisioned this just similar to how your physician might give you a prescription and say, take, this medication 3 times a day and this dose. Exercise is very similar. We want to know which muscle are you strengthening and how many repetitions should you do, and you're going to progress that. So in order to make gains in muscle, in exercise and resistance training, you have to progress yourself. You can't just do the same number of repetitions with the same band every time. So all of this is kind of written out here, very similar to what we think of as a prescription from a physician, but this is your exercise prescription. Okay, so we did this is published and available to you to watch. We wanted to make sure it was clear how this exercise program worked. So can you make it run? Oh, there we go. Okay, so I'm going to kind of talk. So here's the, we gave each person kind of a spreadsheet so that they could determine, again, repetitions, the amount of effort, band color, all of that. And then we use these carabiners to attach the bands. And for looking at hip flexion, which again is that ability to lift your knee like this, you put the band on the lower part of the leg or the middle of the leg and you pull up. So the resistance is where you're trying to strengthen, whatever muscle you're trying to strengthen. And this is it. So this is one way that you can do this at home. You can also, if that's too hard, you can do this in what's called a gravity eliminated plane. So you put a pillow between your knees and you just try to, this is also getting at hip flexion, but now instead of going all the way against gravity, it's a little bit easier because you're going to the side. The other exercise that we will demonstrate at the end is a hip abduction. So really important to get strong this way, but it turns out to keep your balance, you also need strength here. And this is your ability, these are your abductors. And so those muscles in general are often far too weak and they give us a lot of stability as we stand. Okay, you can go to the next. And yours is you.
So we also have done a home balance exercise program. This is for people who have cerebellar ataxia, and they did exercise at home 4 times a week for 6 weeks. And they just only had to do it for 20 minutes, and they actually did 3 exercises in sitting and 3 exercises in standing. And the key result people improved their walking, but the people who improved were the ones that had the most challenge to their exercise that was also safe. They had to be able to do it on their own and successfully. It couldn't be too hard or too easy. So finding that right point was very important. And the way we go about figuring out how to prescribe balance, one thing you want to think about is what are you doing it on? So are you sitting on a firm surface like a chair and you're just working on your upright posture, maybe reaching, maybe just sitting still and keeping your balance? Or do you need to make it a little harder by sitting on a therapy ball, an exercise ball, or on some foam on a chair? You can even progress to something more like a tilt board, which will, give you a different type of stability that you can work on keeping your balance or shifting your weight at that as well. And then moving from sitting into standing, you can also work on changing your foot position. So you're changing how wide are you standing. So if you already stand really wide, maybe you only bring your foot in a couple of inches and then you work on balance exercises, narrowing that base of support at which you have to keep your body over to keep from falling. Or maybe you're able to challenge yourself more and work up towards standing in stride, 1 foot in front of the other, or standing on 1 foot. But just little changes, incremental changes can make a big difference, and you can move up and down this basically on your day. So if you happen to do this exercise in the morning, you might be able to stand on 1 foot, but in the end of the day when you're really tired, don't give up on doing your exercises. That's a good time to work on the ones in sitting, because you also need to be able to function well at the end of the day as well as at the beginning. So and then there's other ways that you can make it more challenging or less challenging depending on where you fall, because you're trying to find that ideal challenge for yourself. So you can change the sensory surface, some like foam or grass or carpeting versus a hardwood floor. You could open or close your eyes, and it may turn that if you want to work on closing your eyes, you may not be able to do it on the foam. Like maybe on the foam you work on balance exercises with your eyes open, but then you can go back to just standing on the hard floor and work with closing your eyes. So don't increase both difficulties at the same time. Take it stepwise and see which ones you can do best. And then as Kathy was talking about earlier, that light touch, it's both a way to make you maybe challenge yourself more. Like maybe you can't stand on one foot without holding on, but maybe you can stand on one foot if you just lightly touch with your finger on the thing. And so you can kind of like work to challenge yourself that way. And it's also, a good reason for holding onto the handrail when you go up and down the stairs. Helps you with just, you're getting that sensory information from your hand that you might not be getting from your feet. And then, as I said, you want to vary that support surface, so use it to your advantage or to make it a little bit harder, and you might need to switch around, and there's a lot of different options, even what your footwear is. So I usually suggest like a good solid base of something to stand on, but maybe doing things in barefoot is also a good change because, when you get up at night, you might not be wearing your shoes. So, okay. And so as I talked about, like, you really want to think about, is this exercise that you're doing, is it effortful? Are you able to keep your balance like 50% of the time? So if you pick up your foot and you can get there, that's great. But if like, as I'm turning my head, I start to lose my balance, and that might be just about the right ability. You want to make sure it's safe. So a lot of times we say start off, if you're doing them in standing, like sitting in the corner of a room, so that you have the wall behind you on either side, and you can put a chair in front, and then you have something, and you might feel more secure trying something more difficult. And similarly, maybe you want to have a spotter, someone with you who can just help, make sure that you're safe, but not help you. You kind of want them there as somebody to catch you if you have run into trouble, but you really want your body responding to the effort that you're doing. And you can add movements of turning your head, because that inner ear, the vestibular system, that's really important with making turns and things. So maybe adding a component of that would be important, or moving your arms might make it more challenging. To reach for a can off the shelf in the kitchen is really different in keeping your weight, because you have to make adjustments for that change in your body's position. And then, you can make this fun. I mean, you can make it every day, like Kathy said, which we think is really important. Like when you go to get out of bed, rolling can be a ton of work. Try like one morning, rolling to your side, sitting up on the edge of the bed, then go ahead and lay back down and do it again. Try doing it 10 times. You will feel your lower abdominal muscles after that. What a good workout to just fit into your day. Maybe, you stand up at your desk to go to the bathroom, or when you come back, you stand up and down from your chair 10 times. Like just sneak it in there. You don't need to do it all the time. But you could also make it more fun. So that's what sort of takes us to my new interest. I sort of got a little out of order, sorry. But this is a demonstration of a gentleman with ataxia who is sitting on this balance disc. And so you just hit that button one more time, the arrow, and it should just start. Yeah. So he's trying that balance disc and sitting, and he's sort of finding what's the best point for him. I don't know. Let's try one more time, maybe. And it's a good thing to look at, because you can see how he kind of needs to have his toes on the ground in order to keep his balance well. But that might be a little bit easy with his feet down. He can manage to turn his head, and he's pretty still. So I would say that's not really challenging him a whole lot. So it might be an exercise that he tries at the end of the day when he's more tired or something. But now he's going to advance it and try tilting side to side. And you see that's like a lot more of a struggle. And it might be a good exercise for when he feels a little bit more stable, or when he has someone spotting him like me. He can add the degree of difficulty, so he's sort of supporting himself a little bit more on that foot on the ground, but he's able to wiggle, make circles, or right in the sky with his other foot. And you can see how hard he's working, but he's learning to adjust to the balance perturbations as he's doing these activities. This is another gentleman who he's similar. So actually, this is a good example of what Kathy was talking about, how balance can change things more than if your coordination is off. So he actually has worse coordination. Like he can't put his foot right where he wants it to go, but his balance is pretty good. So he can do a lot more of these activities a little bit better, more challenging than the other gentleman who actually had better coordination, but worse ability to balance. And he seemed to have a good time with that. So this brings me to the topic that I like a lot right now, which is Tai Chi. And there's a program through the Tai Chi Health Group in Wisconsin where they developed a modified adapted Tai Chi that allows, it's in their community a lot, right, that you can find it, but we can't all do it. And in fact, I'll tell you, the first time I taught somebody, I sent them home with a DVD and they were like, I can't do it. And I was like, well, that's funny. Like, you should be able to. So I took it home. So the traditional original Tai Chi, you have a lot of turning in it. So all of a sudden you're turned over here and the TV that you're watching is over there and you're trying to figure out what you're supposed to be doing and you can't do that, right? So this program is really nice because there aren't any turns, so you can learn it facing one direction. It has a wide range of challenge and it's designed for sitting, for doing it with a walker, for doing it with like the back of a chair or no support at all. And then there's this adapted form, but they even have a next step up form that does have like one turn in it. And so like there's a nice range that I think makes it adaptable throughout our lifetime. Like, and so if you learn this exercise program, you don't have to change it. You can like, you know, fit it into your day and to whatever level you're at. I know we all have our own different preferences, but hopefully we're gonna just do a little demonstration for you in a bit. Yeah, so it's a martial art, actually. It means supreme boxing. And it's actually, you know, it's a very slow martial art, and it's been more developed here in the US for health conditions. So for practicing having upright alignment, there's a number of main like principles to it. But so for postural control, it's about alignment. It's about moving slowly, and slowly is actually harder than moving faster. It's about building strength. It's about being aware of like your base of support, that you're rooted, your feet are rooted, and that your body is guided by rotation at the hips. So like, and that it's just expressed through your hands. So it actually takes us out of a very Western tradition of always thinking about what we're doing with our hands, and forces you to focus on what's happening more centrally. And then it's a mindful movement, sort of like yoga. So it has a component of relaxation to it, as well as attention and focus. And so that can be another additional like benefit to its overall. And it's been shown to improve balance, walking, all sorts of different health conditions. So it has, you know, just a lot of potential if it's something that you like that could make a difference. And I'll let you give a summary.
So we're going to summarize. This is kind of the end of the formal part of the talk, and then we have a demonstration if you want to see that. So just to kind of review and make sure we got at least 1 or 2 points across, we were talking today about postural control and its really impact on balance. Many leukodystrophy symptoms can impact balance, especially strength changes and sensory changes. We know that this imbalance affects our daily lives because so many of the things we do every minute really require some kind of balance. And again, you might not recognize this until things start falling apart, and then it becomes very obvious. We want to target improving balance with a very individualized program. So figuring out where sensory loss is, which muscles are weaker, that's the way that we can target improvement through physical or occupational therapy. The 2 last bullets are really just to kind of keep in mind that feeling off balance can lead to growth, because we do understand some features of balance. There are things you can do right now. And the best time to start was yesterday, but you can start today as well. So it's meant to be inspiring that there might not ever be a perfect time, but learning about it, we're hoping through this session and through our demonstration, we hope will give you some tools to be able to try things out. Okay, so maybe are there questions as we finish this part of our talk? I don't know, are there any online?
Not yet, no.
Okay. Yes.
You mentioned that there are sensors in the ankles.
Mm-hmm.
Can you speak about that a little bit more?
Sure. We have sensors within our tendons that tell us how long a muscle is, and they're not just in our ankles, but for standing balance, your ankle ones are very critical, and they go, you can imagine that they're very important if you're walking on kind of a rocky surface. Now your surface isn't stable. Those sensors are saying, oh, whoop, no, correct, that's too far, come back. So it's sending signals kind of constantly to your brain to offer corrections so you can stay upright. You also have these sensors in every joint. So again, very important so that I can be doing something with my left hand and not look at it, but know what I'm doing. And that is very important for just our ability to do some things kind of automatically. So I can open a jar and talk to someone. I don't have to be watching what I'm doing. Does that help give you a sense of what I was talking about? Okay. Any other questions? Okay, let's move on to the demo, and you can ask questions as we go through, but this is a little bit more of an action portion. So I'm not sure, you have to go to a new set of slides, right? I'll let you. So what we have are, we're going to talk to you about strength training. We're going to talk to you about, we're going to walk you through some different ways to do physical activity, and then we're going to talk to you about Tai Chi in particular. And I'm just going to put a plug in. We're also going to do some of this tomorrow morning at 8 in the morning, right outside the main ballroom. If you'd like to come, and we will make it adapted to people sitting, to people standing, different age groups. But please join us if you have the time. Can you get it? It's right where the right before you walk in that main room. We'll be right out there. And that's at 8 o'clock, 8 a.m. I know. Maybe it's an inspiration to get up. We'll be there. Can you get that open? What we did is we found some videos that you can watch, and then we'll put some towels out so we can. Yeah. All right. I'll leave this so I don't. Okay. We can also just do it on our own without the videos, you know.
So far, yeah, we don't really need the video too much, but this is from the don't close it. So I always feel like we have to start with a disclaimer. So, we're going to just do things that are safe and gentle, and that should be pretty applicable for everybody. But I hope you've either talked to your PT or your physician, and you can do it if you're at home, or if you want to join us here now, just so that you're safe at doing it, and don't do anything if it causes you any discomfort. And then otherwise you can just watch us, and you can try it out at home, or talk to your doctor after this and see if these things are appropriate for you. So thanks for that. I guess I'm going to play PT, and Kathy is going to be my subject, unless anyone else would really like to try, or we can always trade off. So hip abduction, one of my favorites. It's one of your glute muscles. It's on the side of your hip, and it's really important for, say, getting out of a car, trying to keep your balance. When I stand like this, if I don't have my hip abductor here working, my hip drops down and falls, and I lose my balance. My foot gets longer, and I trip over my toe. I can't tell how many people are, think that they have a problem with their ankle, that they have foot drop, and that's why they're catching their toe, but it's really because their hip abductor has gotten weak, and when they take a hip top, they catch their toe as they're walking. So it's really important. And this is a pretty standard exercise, right? You lay on your side like Kathy is down here, and you just say, okay, go ahead and lift your leg. So right there, that's good. But I bet she can feel it right now more in the front of her hip than on the side, because her foot is coming forward. And so if you really want to work that muscle, you need to bring your ankles back right straight in line with your hips, and then come up. And if you're even a little better, you can turn your knee a little towards the ceiling and then go ahead. But now you can see she rolled back, kind of a compensation to do it. Sorry. So if you can keep your hips straight up and down, Kathy. It is hard. Then you can go up. And unfortunately, the room isn't totally set up. It's a lot better if you do this against a wall. So lay down. If I tell her that her shoulders have to be back against the wall and her hips have to be back against my hips, and then she stays there, and then that ankle has to stay back against the wall as you slide it up and down, it gets so much harder, and you're way more set that you're using the right muscle. It already? Yeah, all right. So are you? And then an easy way. Sorry, my props are over here. I didn't take them out. So we, so in the original study, we tied bands and used all sorts of crazy stuff, and but since then, TheraBand has come up with these bands that are just great. Oh, maybe use red because green's pretty hard. So they actually have loops in them already, so you don't have to measure out how far they are and everything. They come already like this. The Velcro band that we put around the leg, we found you can buy them for exercise things, but you can also buy them at Home Depot for hanging stuff in your garage for a whole lot cheaper, and they already come with a carabiner, so you don't even need to buy the expensive stuff. But a simple way to make this exercise harder is just to put one loop over each ankle and then go ahead and pull up and back down, and it doesn't take long to get there. I will even tell you, I don't know anyone who hasn't started when they're laying with their back to the wall and keeping their heel back with any band at all. The first week of doing 20 repetitions, you are going to feel it in your hip abductor. But I will also say that after a week, you'll be amazed at how much easier it gets. So you're like, I'm never going to be able to do this. And then I think the last thing is, Kathy stressed, you need to progress it. So we've had, I don't know how many people said, but I thought this was going to get easier. So the exercise doesn't get easier because you keep making it harder. So every week you're going to still feel it in that hip muscle. You're just going to be making it harder, either by increasing your repetitions, increasing the color of the band, changing the color out, or making it shorter. So if you couldn't do it with one right next to the other, you could use one loop in the middle that's free, and then it's longer, and so it doesn't take as much to stretch it. So
You can also attach these to something solid.
yeah, so they sell door anchors. That's what we like. But you do need a solid door in your house to do it with, which is usually like the front door or your garage door. The closet door is usually not strong enough, but you can hook it underneath there and then hook the bands to the anchor and then to your ankle or the Velcro band or something like that to make it a pretty simple thing. Like, you don't have any excuse. You don't have to go to the gym. You can do it pretty easily. All right. So anybody? Yep. Yep.
Has everyone seen these before? Is this all new, or is this something you've seen before? This kind of thing.
I've seen bands, but not with
The holes, like
Loops.
this, like they're all set up, so there's a lot of them.
And you can buy like a round. I think that they come in a pack so that they're already 5 in length, 5 loops in length. But they can also buy a longer roll of it and then cut it to whatever length that you need. They last. They are like they're not latex, so that's good. But they do have like a limited shelf life in terms of like they kind of break down with air. And if you're using that carabiner, you got to be careful not to get the little teeth hooked on the thing so that it tears it. So maybe. I think we've probably had them last 6 months, but also after you stretch them a whole lot, they do lose a little of their resistance, so you would have to change them out eventually. All right.
How high do you lift your leg?
So I actually didn't show, but you don't want your hip to tilt, so you don't want to go any further than that. So you just want to go as far as you can go and still keep the right alignment and not do any sort of other compensation kind of a thing. So.
And it's hard for me to tell that I'm out of alignment, so it really helped to have her say, oh yeah, I couldn't even tell that. So having the wall will help a lot, because that gives you some sensory feedback, right, that you're against it. But having someone else watch and having them try it, because it looks really easy, but it's really, it is really hard to do this.
Yeah. The other thing I suggest, if you don't have someone home with you, is to just use your phone to record yourself doing it, because you can then play it back and be like, oh, I was doing it like that. It really didn't feel like that. It looked different. It's sort of hard to look in a mirror and do things, though, that it's not always that. So you can have that as a cue, but it's not as easy. And then the last thing, that my new favorite thing, is this thing called motion motion guidance. It's a little laser kit that they sell that you can attach to like your knee or to like your foot, and it comes with like a line, but you can basically line that laser up with a path on the mat that comes with it, and then you can make sure it's staying there. And if that laser goes off of the thing, then you know you aren't doing it correctly. I still think, I mean, probably because it's my profession, but have a trainer, a physical therapist, an OT, somebody like walk you through where you are and what gets you the best stop. And then I don't think you have to go every week for 12 weeks. I think you just need to learn it and do it well, and then make those changes yourself. Yeah. I think it's called motion guidance. Let me look again and see for sure. I sometimes get it. So a colleague of mine, Jen Miller, because we're all named Jen, made a video. It's on YouTube through the Johns Hopkins Ataxia Center that does a whole range of balance exercises. And it's just a good example of things. But in here, she's going to just show you, and we thought we would practice if you wanted to, sitting, and thank you, sitting, and you can just do leg taps, lifting one knee or the other. Simple way to work on it. She does it so perfectly, but you might want to pay attention to when I lift that knee. Do I tilt my trunk back? Am I staying upright? It looks a lot easier than it is. After try lifting your leg up and sitting many times, it can get tiring. And then I really like her example of how you can do some exercises on the floor. And one of the main things is to start with getting down on the floor safely. So, you can use your sofa, sit there and come to your side or your chair and use it to get on the floor easily. And then she gives them demonstrations of some exercises flat on the floor, which makes them more opportunity for everyone to be able to do it, and also using that foam roller that's behind her. So it gives you a way to increase the challenge. And I think she makes the point that you want to do this slow and controlled. It makes it harder, but it also makes sure you have good form. And so she kind of progresses you along to doing leg and arm exercises. But her cue is just really nice, is to think about you have an egg under your foot and you don't want to squash it. And that's like just a nice little image that I think helps remember what you can do. And then this is sort of using those hip abductors that we just showed you. They're called bent knee fallouts, but to do it with control requires you to stabilize at your pelvis. And so, and you can't do anything walking or anything else if you can't keep your, trunk and your leg connected. So those are some balance exercises. And then she also has some standing ones. It's about a 15-minute video, so I encourage you to look it up. I think it just does, has to play at the end. So, do you have any questions about balance exercises? I know this is kind of like a simple sample, but there's a whole range. Okay. So the last thing, if you guys are up for it, is we were going to do a little Tai Chi introduction, and you can do it in sitting or you can do it in standing or however you want to. Thanks. So I thought I would have Kathy do it in standing, and you can use this chair if you want to on this side of you, and then I'll sit. But I think it ended, so I can put up the things. Me this way? Okay. Okay. Maybe try one more. No? Okay. Well, that's okay. We don't need the pictures. Yeah. So this program that I talked about, it starts off with teaching you basic movements, they call it, and they are the fundamentals of all of the Yang style Tai Chi. And so in sitting, the first thing, or standing, is having an upright posture and alignment. Yep. Please feel free to stand up or stretch or work with us. So if you're standing, you want your feet shoulder width apart and your feet flat on the floor. Same thing if you're in sitting, if you can line your knees up with your hips or wherever you're comfortable. And you do want your feet straight. You're working up to having them parallel and not turned out, but a lot of people are more comfortable with them turned out, which is fine to start. And then you want to make sure that you have equal weight bearing between your left and your right side and from front to back. So you might just want to play around with that at all if you need to. And if you're standing, you want to use support because you want it to be relaxed. So that's another principle of Tai Chi, is actually active relaxation. So you're only using the muscles that you need and not a whole bunch of other things. So think about when you get tense and you're doing something and your shoulders go up like this. It does not help you keep your balance at all. But you still do it. So you don't need those. So let's just relax, make sure your shoulders are down. There's a principle in Tai Chi that talks about heavy and light. So if certain parts of your body are heavy, they're relaxed. So your tailbone should be heavy. You should feel that the seat is supporting you, that the ground is supporting your feet. But your head is light. Like you get a little extension of the back of your neck. You lead with the crown of your head. Your shoulders are relaxed. So they're kind of heavy. Your elbows are heavy. So they're hanging right underneath your shoulder. Like if you kind of swing one arm up and back, you can kind of see, like if it's just a pendulum and you're not working, your shoulders aren't doing anything at all. And then just let your arm come back down to your side and be relaxed at your side. And so this is called horse stance. And you can then work on centering here. So I always say take 3 breaths, and I'll do it without talking for you, but just take 3 breaths and notice how you're breathing. And then if that was hard for you, I understand. It takes a minute to like calm your brain down and not be thinking about everything else. Like, you know, it's the end of the day and we're really tired, and we really are appreciative that you've made it out to the end with us. But the other thing you want to do is become aware of your surroundings. So Tai Chi, like I said, is a martial art. So you want to be aware of your surroundings. You're actually trying to avoid conflict in Tai Chi. And so you want to be, you know, notice the light around you, notice what sounds you hear, notice the temperature of the room. It's a way to teach you focus and that relaxation component. So that's the first of what they call the Fab 4 exercises, and it's just horse standing posture. The next one is my favorite, and since I know we only have a few minutes, we'll probably stop here, but if you come tomorrow morning, it's just a sneak preview. It's called bear rooting on one leg. So you want to bend your knees if you're standing enough that your knees are not beyond your toes, and if you're sitting, you just want to still have that nice upright posture, and you could hold on to something or just have your hands out if you need it for balance. And then what you're going to do is shift all your weight to one hip or one foot. And you want to stay nice and upright. So your shoulder is over your hip and your hip is in line with your knee. You haven't tilted to one side or leaned over or come backwards. So if you need support, you should do that. You shift your weight all the way over to one side, unweight that other side. Notice if there's nothing on it, and then shift and go back all the way back to the other side and unweight that other side. And notice if you can keep that same nice alignment. Now, if you're in standing, what you're going to do is go back to the other side again, come all the way over. And now your other foot, once it's totally unweighted, Kathy's just going to lightly bend her knee on that side, and that lifts her heel just the tiniest bit. And it's a little bit harder. And the next step up, because we don't have much time, is I'm going to ask her to lift her toes and just barely lift them. And so that they're hovering over. She hasn't tilted her pelvis or done anything. And her quad is working really hard right now. So, and then go ahead and set it down empty. One other principle in Tai Chi is to put the foot down without any weight on it before you move, kind of like thinking about you're stepping on ice, and you want to make sure that that it's stable before you're going to put your weight on there. I don't know how often we just keep plowing through our lives and we don't do anything. In sitting, you're going to lift actually the side that you're leaning over to, because when you shift your weight to the side, you tend to use your other leg for a little bit of support. So you want to try and lift that hip on that side without tilting or moving back. And then you can come back to the center and then go back over. And this is called bear roots on one leg. And I would say it's the one that everyone takes home and uses because they find it makes such a difference for their balance. I mean, you have to do this, just think about all your daily activities, especially like climbing stairs. You have to shift your weight to one side, or walking. You have to like unweight and be stable. And then before you do anything with a leg, you want to know that you're settled, and then you can put that foot wherever you want to because you have good stability. And maybe you use some of these things that we talked about today, like a light touch on something, a cane for just a little bit of extra sensory support, something like that, can bring it up. So now we've moved from having a stable upright posture and good alignment to shifting your weight side to side. The next two things that we would be talking about tomorrow are having your feet in stride. So one is out to, they're still separate, but one's in front and one's in back, and start moving your weight front to back. So that's another component that we really need for life, for doing things. Think about like opening a door is my favorite one. You know, you come back, you have to shift back. If you have a really good stable posture, that's really not so hard to do. We've been doing it all day, you know, here in the conference rooms. And then the last one is getting to narrowing your like making your base of support smaller. So it would be high knee, which in sitting would look like this, or in standing would look like that. But there's a lot of fine components to it, just like the bear rooting that we talked about, to kind of build on it. And it's a whole exercise routine that you can do that is obviously has a progression of intensity, of balance, with not a lot of, it's more like a general program that your family can do with you and others. So it gives you opportunity to participate in the community. So those are our suggestions. Thank you so much for coming today and listening. We appreciate it.